connect with you after the meeting.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Okay, so that brings us to our topic this evening. Hi, Dan. That's my husband. So,
Sign in.
sign it. First of all, thank you for being here. This is a really important topic and something that I just learned about quite recently at the Parent Advisory Committee last month. Superintendent Pirro let us know about a training that 80 Pittsford staff, teachers, administrators went through this summer around active school shooter safety. It's not a pretty topic, and it's not something that I can tell you that meeting where Superintendent Pirro told us all of the details of the training and kind of what he's been doing to take preventative and protective measures around this district brought some of us to tears. It was, well, I want to just kind of tell you very briefly what he told me and then frame the conversation for tonight. He has already consulted with Monroe County Sheriff's Office, and they have a program in place that we have a guest panelist is going to speak with you about tonight. He has also commissioned safety audits of each of our buildings and even met in Albany with the superintendent of schools from Sandy Hook. Tonight's conversation is an opportunity for parents to learn what we have in place thus far, that there are many layers to this, and learn from the perspective of law enforcement, from parent representatives on our health and wellness and safety committee district level, and to hear from Josh about what we're doing here at Calkins Road specifically. It's important that you know that for security reasons, we can't know everything as parents in terms of what the district is doing, what this particular school is doing to protect our children. But Josh will share exactly what he can share with us and what we need to know. And I can tell you that I left that PAC meeting feeling alarmed and grateful and thankful that we have a district that moved on this quickly and has many folks trained already in what needs to happen in the case or an instance of an active school shooter. So I'm gonna kind of leave this explanation of what's happening to these folks, and then we'll open up to questions and answers. I cannot guarantee, and they cannot guarantee, they're going to have answers to all of our questions. Nobody here is an expert in this really yet, and thankfully. But it's important that you voice your concerns, that you tell us and tell the district committee what it is you want to know, what you want to see, what you're scared of and worried about, and what's going on with your kids. I do know that my own child, when every time there's a lockdown drill, has a pretty serious anxiety attack about it. And it's a very real fear right now, especially after the recent news. And we all know that that no system is perfect, but prevention is the best medicine, and there's a lot going on in this district to prevent something like this from happening. So let me introduce to you our guest speakers tonight. First, thank you so much. We have Lieutenant Mike Wicks, who is the SWAT commander from Monroe County Sheriff's Office, who's here to tell you about what's happening from his perspective. Josh is going to talk a little bit about the training this summer and what he knows from the district level. Many of you may or may not have already seen that Superintendent Pirro put out an excellent letter today to the community to explain pretty generally kind of what's happening at the district level around this stuff. So if you haven't seen it yet, please do go back and read it after the meeting, and Josh will actually point to some pieces from the letter today as well. And we also have Ann Binstock and Gina Platos here tonight. They are our parent representatives from the Health and Safety and Wellness Committee, and we are, let me promise you, we are in great hands with these two women who have served in many different roles here in the district and have some really, really important perspectives to add as well. So they are here to really listen to your questions, to tell you and update you on what's happening at the committee level. And please, I would love for you guys to come on up here. Take a seat. I'm going to sort of be the moderator, if that's okay. And I think it would be smart to start with you, Lieutenant. And if you could just tell us from your perspective, why do we need this in the first place, and how did Monroe County Sheriff get involved, and what are the kinds of measures that are being taken now to protect the schools?
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for having me here. I'll give my background real quick, and then I'll get into the things that we're doing. I've been with the Sheriff's Office since 2003. Prior to that, I was in payroll and accounting for about 10 years. Took a change in direction of what I want to do with my life. 2003 is when I came on the job. 2007 is when I got on to the SWAT team. And for the last 2.5 years, I've been the commander of the SWAT team. A large focus of what we've done over the last 10 years or so has been educating ourselves for active threat situations. Not only our response as law enforcement or the SWAT team, but that's really rolled into the responses for basic road patrol, and then getting out to the communities and educating them the best that we can as far as what they should expect from our response when we get there. So all kind of started, really the focus, just a brief overview, but you're all aware of Columbine, and that's kind of where the focus of law enforcement's response to these types of incidents occurred. That was back in '99. And really the idea back then was law enforcement would just show up and we would contain what was going on, and then they would call the SWAT team, and 45 minutes later we would show up and we would go inside and sort out whatever type of issue there is. Now, on average, I have statistics and all that stuff for anybody that's interested. If you go onto the FBI website, you can get all the information about active threats that have occurred in the United States, way beyond the amount of information that you would want. They really break it down. But what we do with this information is anytime one of these tragedies happens, anywhere, whether it's in the United States or in a different country, we analyze it. We're trying to figure out what is the cause of this? How do we prevent this stuff? Can we prevent it? But more importantly, from a law enforcement perspective, is if it does happen, how can we minimize what happens there and help people survive these situations? Because the reality as far as statistics shows, the average amount of time that one of these incidents occurs is 5 minutes. It's over in 5 minutes. 90% of them are over within 10 minutes. So there's so much that we can do, but we have to really focus on if this does happen. We can't dismiss that it's not going to happen. We pray that it doesn't happen. We do everything that we can to put in measures to keep it from happening. That's really part of what they're going to discuss tonight. My focus when I come in and do these trainings is to give a realistic view of what happens during these situations. We're not going to kind of turn a blind eye to it saying, well, we hope it won't happen here. It's a very difficult topic, as she had mentioned. It's hard stuff to hear. It's hard stuff to see. It's much more difficult to go through it. So we come in, we do these presentations. I was invited over the summer. I'm the one that came out and met with all the folks, the faculty and staff. Sheriff Baxter has been a huge advocate for this. He got out, he went to a superintendent's meeting for Monroe County and really offered up our assistance to any districts within Monroe County that wanted us to come in and do our presentation and see what we could do. So obviously we've received a lot of requests with that, Pittsburgh being one of them, so we came in. And the presentation really revolves around, like I said, this is the reality of it if it happens. We need to understand that. And then we put into the training basic, it's very basic, easy concepts as to what people can do, faculty and staff, what they can do if something does happen to minimize things, and also what they can expect from law enforcement when we arrive on scene. Because quite often, folks that are involved in the incident have a lot of information. There's a lot of things that they can do to help us get things sorted out even faster. Sandy Hook was already mentioned. That's one of the briefings that I do during my presentation about what really happened at Sandy Hook. Things that the district had done prior to it occurring and what their response was when it happened. But still, within 6 minutes, we had almost 30 people lose their lives within 6 minutes. So with the training, we talk about the different things that we could potentially expect for faculty and staff or any adults, hopefully to do during one of these incidents, what they should expect from us when we arrive on scene. But we took it a step further. We added some breakout sessions. And with those included three different things. We brought a medical component into this. We have folks that are involved in this program called Stop the Bleeding. Unfortunately, when many of these incidents occur, there's lives that can be saved. Even if somebody gets injured, there's lives that can be saved if we provide them treatment fast enough. And the treatment's very easy. So part of this session is showing them, how do you pack a wound? How do you put on a tourniquet? Those things are extremely simple to do, very minor training that's involved in it. But so many people that lose their lives during these incidents is from a loss of blood because we couldn't get them the medical help that they needed in a timely manner. So we put that out as one of the breakout sessions. We have a second one that was all about barricading a room. How do you do it with what you have at your disposal right there? What are some things that maybe you should think about purchasing to provide for the classroom setting, to make it more difficult for that person to get into that room? Buying time, letting law enforcement get on scene and sort things out. How do you do it? Basic concepts, very easy things. Stuff that you can do with cables from a computer to help with a door. Things that you can, whether you're wedge under the door, or do I have the ability to actually move this file cabinet? Maybe if this file cabinet is too heavy for one person to move, maybe we're going to rearrange the room a little bit and put things in better positions where I can put it in front of the door. What can we do to have that person hopefully believe there's nobody in that room? Where should we be standing in the room if we are hiding from somebody? Difference between cover and concealment. What's going to protect me from bullets? What is not? Is, standing behind a drywall, that's concealment. Now the person can't see you, so maybe that's good enough. But if that wall is now made out of concrete or cinder blocks, that's different. Now you have more of cover. So we're certainly not going to the school saying, hey, knock down all the drywall and we're going to build up cinder block walls. But it gives folks an idea to think about it and say, well, maybe this is a better place to have my students line up. Maybe there's something I need to put over these windows so the person can't look in there. How do I wedge to the door? So very practical things that we walk the folks through, bring them into a room and say, take what you have in this room, barricade the door. See how you can do that. Something as simple as a double exit door that has the push bars across, the handles. You just take a chair with two legs and slide it down in. Now those doors won't open because the chair is keeping it. Anybody can do that. Have we ever thought of it? And probably the largest part of the presentation was really about mindset. We have a term that we use is your body won't go where your mind hasn't been before. So we're not out there trying to make people paranoid by any means. We are showing them the reality of this. But if you haven't gone there in your head before, thinking, if this happens, what would I do? You now have to come up with a hasty plan in the middle of an incident that is going to be the most difficult, stressful situation in your life. How good of a plan is that going to be? Right? You don't have an opportunity to test it. You don't have an opportunity to think. You're stressed. You're code black. You're not taking things in, taking in information, and you're just reacting. So we challenge them to think about this in your own personal setting. I can't come up and tell everybody their specific situation and what they're going to do. They need to come up with it, those individuals. 50 people in one building, 50 teachers, all 50 teachers' situations are going to be different. So we give them ideas. What can they think about? Have they been there before in their head so they can save those precious seconds and already have a good plan in place if something happens? That's really the concept. And then we take it a step further. Absolutely worst case scenario, and that person starts to come into the room. What do? Do you have the physical ability to fight this person? Do you have the mental ability to fight this person? What weapons do you have? What can you use as weapons? I mean, there's very basic things, and I'll give you some examples as to what they went through, just to kind of get your mind there, right? So I start with, do they have the physical ability to fight somebody off that has a gun, right? Immediately you're thinking, well, how do I win? How do I win a fight when somebody comes in with a gun and I don't have anything in there to protect myself, right? Well, let's think about this. I'll walk you through what I do during the training. We got
Yeah,
a good
you're doing
5,
great.
10 minutes? Okay. So I want you to think about this. Anybody in here ever held like a newborn baby, and that baby gets a hold of your earring and pulls, right? What's that do? Distracts you, it hurts you a little bit. It's a newborn baby. I mean, you already know that you're not going to drop the child. You can get through that without any type of issue, right? But a newborn child can cause some type of distraction, a little bit of pain. So we take it to the next step. Say a 5-year-old child is having a tantrum. You kneel down and get in front of them, get on the same level as them. You try and reason with a 5-year-old child, and that child isn't having it, smacks you across the face. Anybody have that happen? I have. Same type of thing, right? It hurts, it distracts you. It stops you from what you were thinking about, and it changes your gear, right? Because you weren't expecting it. So now the question is, and usually what I do is I'm looking around the room and I'm kind of seeing, you know, who's really thinking about this, who really thinks that they can take on somebody with a gun. And I then choose somebody who it appears that maybe they don't have that ability. And I'll ask them to stand up, and I'll say, all right, who now wants Jamie here to punch you in the face as hard as she can? And I ask you that very seriously. Who would like her to punch you in the face right now as hard as you can? Well, nobody wants that, right? Because everybody has some physical strength to cause damage to somebody, okay? So the physical ability is there. And then we could talk about what type of weapons do you have. And I'll ask you folks right now, other than myself, somebody has a firearm in here, I don't want to know about it, but what weapons do we have right now?
Pens.
Outside of what I have? Pens, okay? Purse, sure.
Boots.
Boots, of course. Phone,
Got some
computer.
fingernails.
Okay, fingernails, right?
Steam.
Yep, absolutely.
Keys.
Yep. So we start thinking a little bit bigger. What a fire extinguisher, right? There's fire extinguishers, there's one right back there. So now I have the ability to grab that and I can blast somebody from a distance, right? If I need to. That's going to cause a distraction, that's going to buy us some time. I can also take the cylinder and hit somebody with that, which is much more significant. Have we ever thought of that? Right? A rolled up newspaper. So I'll tell you a quick story. We've done a few of these for Rush Henrietta, and one of my guys, you may have seen it on the news, I think it was Spectrum that came in and they were filming part of it. And he took a magazine and just wanted to show that what type of damage a magazine can do. Right? We've never thought of this before. And you roll this up, and this is what one of my guys did, and he rolled up a magazine real tight. The tighter the better, and it becomes more of like a baton. And while the news was there and we're teaching this group the session, he takes this magazine, he goes boom, and he hits the table with it. He put a hole right in the table, right in front of the camera, right in front of everybody. Surprised everyone, right? A magazine was able to put a hole through a laminated table. Who would have thought of that? We have magazines all over the place. All I have to do is roll it up, and now I have some type of impact weapon. Okay? So those are the types of things that we're talking about. But now we have weapons. We know we have the physical ability to do it. Do we have the mental fortitude to do it? It's easy to stand up here and say, hey, I'm going to take this pencil if I need to, and I can do something very violent with this. I can stick it in somebody's neck if I need to, right? But can you? Have you thought about it? If push comes to shove, do you have the ability? So only you internally can have that answer. Can you do it? But then I ask you, what if your child was in the room with you? Does that change anything? If you're there by yourself, do you have the ability? I guarantee if your child is there with you, you have the ability. You have the physical ability. You know how to use some type of weapon. And now you have the mental ability. So whether your child is with you or not, you can do this if you need to do it. And if you don't think about it and you find yourself in that position where you need to do it, are you going to be able to do it? If you go on there in your head saying, yeah, I can do this. I know what I need to do. I know I've got a fire extinguisher back there. Or I have a cup of hot coffee that I can throw at this person as they're coming at me. Nobody wants hot coffee thrown in their face, right? Very basic, easy concepts that you just have to go there once or twice in your mind, then you're all set. All these concepts that we talk about don't apply just to schools as well. And that's kind of the great thing about this whole thing. These incidents occur all over the place. Out in the air, schools, malls, Lane Bryant stores, Navy shipyards, movie theaters. It occurs all over the place. So it's really just about having a plan, having an idea, being aware of your surroundings, trying to prevent this 100%. That's the ultimate goal, that this never happens. But if it does happen, I at least have a plan that I can follow, and I know how to assist law enforcement when they get there with descriptions, or making sure that, you know, when I show up on scene, if that you're listening to the commands that I give you. Because my goal when I arrive on scene is to stop that threat. I need to bypass everything and go directly to that threat. Because statistics show that as soon as we get on scene, generally it ends. Even if there's no confrontation between law enforcement and that person, it ends. Or if there has to be some type of confrontation, we get on scene, it ends. So when I get there, if I'm in an elementary school and there's young children, I've been there in my head. So I can expect it when I show up, and I'm not surprised by what I see. But if there's young children that are hurt or injured and they're in the hallway and I arrive on scene, I can't stop and help them. Do we know why that is? I can't do that. Because if I stop and help this one child right then, 6 more could get injured while I'm assisting that person. My immediate goal is to get to that threat and stop that threat. I've got a lot of resources that are coming that are going to be able to help those people that are already injured. The schools are working on putting things into place. How do teachers, other students, everybody can help each other if somebody's hurt. So that's what we're really trying to get out there. We have more resources coming, but when I get there, I have to stop that threat. That's the reality of it. And then we've got more people coming in to help these people. So we're not losing lives from blood loss, because it's a very easy thing to prevent. So that's kind of the role, or that's really what we presented to the district. And obviously with the policies and procedures that they're putting in place, they can always come to us and we can give them some guidance, ideas as what we think. But every district, every school building is different, right? So these things may change quite a bit from building to building or district to district. But the fact that the schools, including Pittsburgh, is reaching out to us for resources to try and get more information. What can we do? How can we prevent this? What can we do if it does happen to try and minimize it? It's fantastic. We're moving in the right direction. And if somebody knows how to stop these things from happening in the first place, give me a shout, let me know, because that's really our ultimate goal.
Thank you.
Kind of 2 peripheral questions. So how well does law enforcement know the schools? Like, I find the school to be a maze, and I'm here almost every day. So how well does the people that are coming to help understand what each school, how it's laid out, or?
That's a great question. So we have 3 platoons. We have First platoon, which is our overnight shift from 10 at night till 6 in the morning. Second platoon is from 6 a.m. till 2 in the afternoon, and third platoon is from 2 to 10. So our second platoon and third platoon are the ones that are working while school is in session. So we've asked them, and it's been going on for a long time, that deputies show up on scene, stop in the office, let people know that they're there, and they walk the buildings. They take a look. But I'll tell you this, I would like you to think about it, and I'm going to follow that up a little bit further. But, for those of you that work, and I want you to think of the building that you work in. And this is part of the presentation, the run, the hide, the fight type thing. How well do you know your building? Are you familiar with every area of your building? Is there roof access? Is there a basement? Could you potentially be in a part of your building that you've never been in before, and an incident occurs? Would you know where to run? Would you know where to hide? Right? So we're along those same lines, but there's so many buildings. There's so many different shifts. There's so many deputies that may respond, and we're going to have people coming from other counties to this location, guaranteed. If something were to happen in this building, Sheriff's Office is coming, Brighton is coming, Greece, Livingston County, State Police, East Rochester, pretty much every local law enforcement within a certain radius is headed this direction. So to answer your question, one of the things that you'll notice in most buildings, and this is something that assists us, any entrance or exit from outside should have a map next to that door. And one of the things that we talk, now we'll get that map off that wall however it's placed on that wall, but for law enforcement, I can't guarantee that I'll have ever walked in this building. We're doing our best, and by having vehicles outside, and there's a comfort that's involved in it, and maybe there's some prevention just by us being outside if we're there at the right time. But the reality of it is we have roughly 200, Sheriff's Office roughly has 250 deputies on the road. For me to hope that they would have a good enough understanding under such a tremendous amount of stress as to what that building looks like, it would be very difficult. But if I know when I go into the building, at whatever door, I can look to the edge of the door and I can grab a map and take that with me, and it's got that little red dot on there that says you are here, I now know exactly where I am. Other things that attach to that is certain buildings, I can get outside and I'm looking at the building and it's 3 stories high and there's 75 windows. And I'm out there as law enforcement and I see him. There he is. I can see whatever's going on in that room. How do I let the deputies inside the building know where he is? How do I get that information to him? Well, what schools are doing is they're labeling their windows from the outside with the room number. I look up and it says 275. So I get on my radio and I say, the shooter's in room 275, and the guy inside who has that map in his hand says, well, I'm right here at the red dot. There's room 275. I go right to room 275. Very inexpensive, easy concepts for us to minimize anything that's going on if it were to happen. Right? So to answer your question, we are getting out in the schools as much as we can. There's a much greater presence than we've ever seen. Me as the SWAT commander, there's many school districts that we will take our road patrol deputies and do a roll call training in the school on a weekend. And we'll take an hour and we'll have them go through the tactics that we have if we have to respond, and it gets us more familiar with the buildings. So that's what we're doing on our end. So I think that, it certainly helps to be somewhat familiar, but I can't count on that. So what I can count on is coming in the building and finding that map and knowing right where I am. That's those types of
And I
things.
have
Great
just one other
question.
kind of peripheral question. Does Pittsburgh have a central location where parents would go if something were to happen? So I'm just imagining, right, I'm at work, I'm gonna come here, but you guys don't want us here.
Well, in the event of something going on, whatever the location is, there's a building incident management team, there's a district incident management team. Depending on what the situation is, the district incident management is probably going to be taking the lead, and that's all part of their role to set up where's the central point, where is the parent location, and that's all part of their communication that would then just start going on with them.
That's a good segue.
Because if there was
Josh,
something
yeah.
here, we're not going to necessarily be setting up a building central point, right?
So why don't you take it from here, Josh, and let us know what you learned and what from your perspective, the district is doing and what Calkins is doing.
Just
Well-
very quickly, I wanted to ask Josh, what happens in the case of Baca where the district and the building are the same thing?
Good question.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it's been thought about, but it's worth asking the question to make sure.
What she asked was,
Yeah.
at Barker Road, the district office is attached. Now, our director of security, Jeff Beardsley, is at the bus garage. So,
Oh.
knowing how our district works, and if then this, if this, then this, I'm guessing at his location, that's where they're setting up the central point. To go into what all of our emergency plans would be some information that we don't necessarily put
Right.
out there, but I think that's a safe assumption that they have things in different locations. But great question.
We'll take more questions definitely at the end. I would love to hear from Josh
Sure.
and then just a bit from our
yeah.
parents too.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, and thank you, Mike, so much for sharing that. Being part of the summer training, it was intense, and it was the thing that you never want to go through, but you know is necessary, and it definitely impacted as I came back to the building and walked, during the summer I'm constantly walking around, usually to check and see how things are being cleaned up and stuff like that for our summer. Looking at every nook and cranny, looking at the things that maybe even as in my 6 years principal, I haven't walked necessarily in there more than once or twice. I'm in this room, I'm in my office, I have knickknacks, for those of you that know my office, I've got knickknacks everywhere. I know which ones I'm grabbing if I need to. Now, and I know about those doors, those particular doors. Things that you never necessarily have looked at in that way, but is important, like you said, your mind needs to go there first. A lot of the things that Mike talked about, and that I know Anna Gina will talk about in terms of the layers, and what I would like to talk about is, here in the building, what do we do? Well, we have 4 types of situations, 4 types of drills that we have. The fire drills, that we all know that we're required to do at certain points. That's an evacuation and then bringing them back in. We have what's called the shelter in place, where we have our students, they remain in their classrooms, and that might be for such things as maybe there's a medical emergency in the hallway, we just don't want kids moving. And then we have the 2 bigger things are a lockout and a lockdown. And we practice these during the year. They're very, exactly what you would imagine. A lockout is nobody's coming in, and if possible, shutting down campus. We have a marked unit there that's out at the road, or district security, and the lockdown is the thing that nobody really enjoys practicing. I remember my kindergartner coming home and talking about his lockdown drill several years ago. And that's something that we do several times during the year. We do it at different periods. So teachers can have the practice in, okay, in this particular class, teachers that go to different classrooms, when I'm in this particular room, this is what I need to do to move my students and get them out of sight and keep them safe. Different times during the day. When we have lunches, we do lockdown drills. And then we bring them to another location. What does that look like? How do you move that many kids that quickly? Is everybody that is in the cafeteria trained? Has access to the keys? Do our substitute teachers, especially our new ones that might come in as we're getting new subs, are they aware? One of the biggest things that you can do, I remember hearing from Mike when he spoke with the superintendent of Sandy Hook, that locked doors would have been a major, major preventative piece. Well, every one of our doors in the building has an intruder lock, which means that any teacher's key, even if they're not assigned to that room, can lock any room from the inside. So in this situation, rooms can be secure like that. Every room also has a key hanging in it for our substitutes. So if somebody's in that room or they don't have a key, they can lock a room like that and they can secure it. So that's something that's been in place since I got here. So that's I think Pittsburgh's been kind of ahead of the curve on that one. And we do those drills at different points through the year, sometimes in bad weather, but different periods, all up and down in the spring and in the fall, because we want the kids, again, I go back to what Lieutenant just said, with you gotta put your mind there, right, in order to be able to do it. I will say our kids and our staff take these things extremely seriously. I'm actually very proud of them when we go through these sorts of activities. Mike Piro, there's a lot of Mikes. Mike Piro, his newsletter, as Jesse said, you can tell I printed it out. I did some highlighting like a good student. It's really fantastic what was sent out today and very, very timely. He talks about the multiple, and I would say go back and read this. He talks about the multiple layers. Lieutenant Wicks talked about the layer that is around our law enforcement and our response and prevention piece. One of the things that I would like to talk a little bit more about here is the prevention in the school. And what are the things that we can do that can help? Going past all my highlights, one of the things I really want to talk about is our social emotional piece, our inclusivity work, our using common language, are trying to make sure that our students emotionally, socially, mentally are taken care of, are supported. Kids are supporting each other, that we're supporting our parents. A lot of the things that we do with our clubs and our activities and the Midnight Way and things, it sounds like, oh, how is that related to school safety? It very much is, because you could read any number of articles and the profile of people that are involved in these sort of things are very similar, that there was lack of connection for whatever they were, whether it was in school, whether it was to a place of worship, whether it was to a workplace, that lack of connection. And that's so important, especially at this developmental age, that we help our young ones make that connection to even one adult in the building. And that is research-based, that if a kid feels a connection to one caring, trusted adult, the chances of them dropping out of school are almost none. And now, while dropping out of school isn't something that often comes up, it's that connectivity piece. Kids don't leave school because the work is too hard. They leave it because they don't have a connection. There's some great resources that I was all prepared to share with you that Mr. Piro hyperlinked in his newsletter. But one thing that is on the Calkins page, it's on the district page, and we're blasting it out in the next newsletter, is this parentandteen.com. It is an absolutely unbelievable resource. Mike has talked about how he's used it in his conversations with students and parents. I know I've had the opportunity to do that a little bit. I've used it at home. He's not quite a teenager, but I use it with my 10-year-old. There's some outstanding resources about just talking to our kids. So what role can parents do is just continue to have those conversations. That if you see something, say something. I know there's been some things that have happened in our Pittsburgh district when people have stood up and said, I don't know if this is right. And then telling the school and informing people and then acting on that. And maybe it's nothing, but we want to make sure it's nothing, right? And working together. I'm so proud to work here and the collective support that everybody provides for our kids and for our schools. I don't want to go into all the details about our plans because, as we talked about, for security reasons, but I think if I were to pick one thing on that preventative piece, it's that social emotional support and how critical it is. That if you're at home and your young one you see them feeling lost, feeling frustrated, feeling angry about something, or one of their friends, or you hear them talk about something they saw on social media, ask, see what you can find out. Let us know. And if there's something really that's out there, like imminent threat, the call's not necessarily to me, the call's to him, right? And then let us do our jobs. Because nobody wants to say, oh, you see it all the time, right? I should have done this. Or it's a very emotional thing for me to even talk about. I was talking with Lieutenant Wicks before, starting my career down south, where the DC sniper was, when it was happening, and things like that. Lost students to tragedy. I cannot stress enough the importance of connecting with our children and connecting with school. So I can kind of go back and forth, but I think at this point,
Thank
I'd
you
like
so
to pass it
much,
off to Gina and
Josh.
Anna, and then we can keep talking.
Thank you. So Anne and Gina, can you tell us what the committee is responsible for and what,
So the district health and safety and health and wellness committee is an advisory body for all 9 schools within the district, and the goal is to make recommendations to the superintendent for policy. So we don't set policy, but as the parent representatives on this committee, we try to take the questions or suggestions or ideas that are given to us as parents and come and discuss it with the members of this committee, who are people like the head of security, the head of school services, principals, school nurses, school psychologists. It's a group of people who kind of have a shared responsibility for thinking about health and safety from a policy perspective. And I think Gina's going to give an update on some of the work that we've been doing lately.
were both of you part of the training in the summer, or either of you?
So I did do the training,
Okay.
and I have my tourniquet in my bag. So thank you. It was one of those added benefits that in addition to knowing how to
Okay.
pack a wound, we were taught with tourniquets, and I carry it everywhere. Every handbag I've switched since the summer, I take it with me everywhere. And I'll let Gina talk about the work of the committee, but I know as a parent, someone who sat through this and did that training and practiced pulling the gun out of someone's hand and all of the things that were really incredibly intense. I know that as a parent, one of the things that I took away was the extent to which this is a life skill I have to teach my child. Because she was going a week after this training to a concert down at Darien Lake, and I thought, you know what, she is just as likely to be involved or the victim of an incident at this concert, and it's not at the school, and there isn't going to be a teacher looking out for her. And I think in the same way that we talk to our kids about sex and drugs and alcohol, the reality is safety in public spaces is another thing that we have to talk to our kids about, and that it's not just one conversation and that you roll it out slowly, but you begin with just being aware of your surroundings, being aware of your exits. And I think that message that was delivered, that you really just have to survive for 5 minutes. I joke that it's sort of like childbirth, like it will end. How do you survive those 5 minutes? And if you can shelter in place, you shelter in place. And if you can't, you think of that run, hide, fight mantra, and where can you go? And I know as a parent, as upsetting as it was to go through that training, it was also incredibly empowering that I felt like I now had things to talk to my kids about. And it isn't just the school's responsibility, it's also my responsibility as a parent to talk to my kids.
Thank you, Anne.
Okay, so I have some notes to report back from our last committee meeting, which was last week on October 24th. And basically we started out, we reviewed the district planning team's feedback on the safety committee evaluation that they did last year. And the feedback was favorable. They approved adding new membership to the committee, and they wanted to make sure that there was a representative from every building of the 9 buildings. Right now, I think there's just one from every level, right? Elementary, middle, and high. So now they want one from every building so that way they can take the information back to the building directly. They considered changing the name of the committee. Right now, we're the Health and Safety Committee, and then there's the Health and Wellness Committee. So it's a little confusing. Some people are on both, like Anne. So they talked about some ideas, calling it just safety or safety and security to better distinguish it from the Wellness Committee. We reviewed the safety training PowerPoint presentation that will be brought to the Pittsburgh District Leadership Team in early November. And that PowerPoint highlighted the basic but most important information that was gained from the summer training that Lieutenant Wicks just told you about. So what they want to do is get this information out to all the teachers at the faculty meetings over the next 2 months or so, November and December. So basically the most important things that can be done and implemented immediately, they're trying to get that out there. There was discussion on how to provide guidance for students, staff, and parents on following through with See Something, Say Something, and discussion on our current prevention programs that are going on throughout the district. So it seems like there's a lot of different things happening, elementary, middle, and high. Not everyone's doing the same thing. I mean, some are more appropriate for elementary versus high school, things like that. But they want to know what everyone's doing and if there are any gaps anything that needs to be improved. So we want to get an inventory of that. And finally, Ann and I passed along the questions that we collected. You may have seen our call for feedback in the newsletters, asking for questions, concerns, and even suggestions. We collected quite a few. We put it together and gave that to Pat Brogan, and she gave it to the superintendent. He actually mentions it in the e-newsletter. So Pat wants us to go over as a committee, review the questions further, get into it a little deeper. And that was really it.
Will there be access to those questions and answers for the public and the community at a certain point, or some sort of FAQ maybe that?
Yeah, that was mentioned that they do want to address the questions, whatever they can answer, they want to get it out there, the answers, but they didn't decide as a committee how best to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for your perspective, and Anne, thank you for sharing that personal experience. So let's open it up to questions. I'm sure you have some thoughts, folks. Yes.
I got a couple of questions, but I'll start off with one and then maybe we can get a chance later. So one question is there a different type of alarm that can go out through the school system if it's a shelter in place versus a fire alarm, for instance? How does everybody in the school get notified that they shelter in place or fire?
An announcement. We make the announcement, and I'm glad you asked that, to expand on that. Our fire drill is a buzzer. Our shelter in place or our other drills, we do via announcement. I know one of the things we've talked about is what if we can't make that announcement? So that's the next level. So that's I know our safety group is talking about.
Okay, because
That's a great question.
understanding what the lieutenant said, every second counts.
Absolutely.
So if it's as easy as just getting a different type of sound on there, it's going to buy you a lot of time. Everybody's going to know instantly.
I'll speak to that actually. So here's kind of the thought process when it comes to making notifications. This is my opinion that you use plain language. I don't want somebody to go, all right, was that the fire signal or was that the active threat signal? Or it should be plain language, very easy, so nobody's going to misunderstand. We want it as simple as possible, and there has to be backups to that, as he was just saying. So if for some reason you can't do that, or that person is sick that day, whatever the case may be, we want it simple, straight to the point, and make sure that there's backups for it. And as you know, as we've unfortunately noticed, some of these incidents, they're now coming in and they're hitting the fire alarm, right? So, and what that could cause is for somebody to automatically go, all right, well, we've got a fire drill. Line up, everybody out into the hallway and do what we do, right? So now procedures are being put into place, so we are not just, we hear the bell and we're gonna eat food, that we're going to think about this. Maybe we stop at the door real quick. Maybe there's some other type of notification that comes with it before we just blindly go out into the hallway, right? So we want to think about it, but we have to train that. We have to make sure everybody's on the same page. Great question. Thank you.
Karen?
So I guess in my mind, and thinking about the shootings that have happened, I'd always visualized it that the person coming in with the gun was at a far enough distance to be able to shoot and kill that it was hard for people to get near them to attack and take them down. So when you were talking about, you know, look at what your weapons are and what have you, what is the likelihood of somebody within the situation, inside the situation, not the law enforcement coming in, actually having an opportunity to attack somebody with a gun without getting themselves killed at the same time?
Repeat that last part.
Without getting themselves killed. So if, you know, you talked about, you know, what weapon can you have? What weapons do you have around you? Are the incidences often that people are getting close enough to the shooter?
Well, I can't speak on all of the incidents, but I'll tell you this. Let me put it in a certain perspective. Right? As far as weapons go, and a person's ability. Now, I'm highly trained with weapons, coming from where I come from. Pistols and long guns are significantly different as far as accuracy and ability. Right? So as trained as I am with a pistol and a long gun, a rifle, very difficult for me to hit somebody 25 yards away, standing still, under no stress, right? So now add that stress and add that the person is moving, makes it very difficult, right? Long guns are significantly different, but that's coming from somebody who's highly trained with this stuff. Practice all the time.
And what is a long gun?
A long gun would be like a shotgun or a rifle.
Okay.
Right? So we've got our pistols and we've got our long guns. And that's part of the training that we put out is that's information that us as law enforcement want to know. We want to hear that from the inside because that may change our response because of the ability. Like if we're going to put our perimeter up with a pistol, I can be relatively close and relatively safe. But to answer your question, right, the statistics, and actually, you know what, I'll pull it up. I brought this for a reason, just in case. I think it's on this one. Oh, here it is. All right, 2016 to 2017, these are the FBI statistics. There were 50 active threat incidents within the United States. 50, 25 per year in those 2 years. Now, we wouldn't really think of that, right? From 2000 to 2017, 18 years, we had 250 active threat incidents that meet the criteria of what an active threat is in the United States alone. From 2000 to 2007, it averaged about 6.5 a year. From 2008 to 2013, it bumped up to 16.5 per year. 2014 and 15, it was 20 per year, and then I just told you it's bumped up to 25 per year, right? So we don't know why that's happening. We know it's increasing. But I tell you that because this is real. This stuff happens. We're doing everything that we can to stop it, but we have to be prepared if it does. During 16 and 17, to get to my point, of those 50 incidents, there were 943 casualties. Right? Now, a casualty means somebody was injured or killed, that somebody was physically harmed by that, right? Of those casualties, now that's a very high skewed number because of Las Vegas. That's very high, that one incident. However, it goes year by year and it falls along the same patterns. Of those 943, 722 were wounded and 221 were killed. Right? So statistics, if you're into statistics, statistics show you are more likely to get hurt and survive than not. If I don't do anything, if that person comes into this room, comes through those doors, and I do nothing, we have just changed the balance of that, and everybody is going to not just be a casualty, but they're not going to survive it. Right? So that's part of the mindset. So if I know I have the physical ability to do it, and I know I have the mental ability to do it, and I'm still putting myself in a dangerous situation by maybe grabbing the end of that gun and controlling the barrel, because the barrel's the dangerous part, right? Something's going to come out of that. And if that gun goes off and I get hit, statistics show I'm going to survive it. I have a better chance of surviving it than not. So, to answer your question, so this is the reality. That's the hard stuff to hear and hard stuff to think about. But I know that I've been there so many times in my head, I automatically know what I'm going to do. And I know in my room where should I stand. So we'll use that as an example of how do we get close to these people. We don't want to be close to them. We want to get the heck out of there, right? But if I'm in that hide phase, I can't get myself or my students out of that building. And now I've secured my room the best that I can. I barricaded it. Hopefully that's enough where the person can't get in there. But guess where I'm standing while that person's trying to get in there? I'm standing right next to that door where he's coming in. And why is that? Because the first thing that's coming through that door is the muzzle of that gun, and I'm grabbing it and I'm doing everything I can to control that gun. And everybody else is grabbing the fire extinguisher and the flagpole and the computer and the pens and the hot coffee and the keys and the rolled up magazines, and it's over. Do I get shot when I grab that? I might, but it's over. and then I'm gonna get the medical treatment, and I'm gonna survive.
Thank you.
Sorry, it gets a little intense, but that's,
And that was
That's
what I was
the
trying to
reality.
understand, because in my mind, I'd always visualize it more at this distance, like, how do you stop
well,
that? But what
one of
you're
the
saying,
things
it's
at the
more a
training
reality of,
that I took away, and I don't know anything about guns, but when we were in the room, we were asked to close our eyes and listen to the sound that the gun makes, and I'm probably not even gonna use the right words, when the
Magazine,
when
you
the
got it.
magazine falls, and the idea that that is when you have a 10-second window during that change of weapons to do something, and that was something I would have never thought of, but when you asked that question, the first thing that entered my mind is like, oh, I'll wait till they're changing the magazine, and that's when I know that I'm going. Because I was forced to think about it and forced to close my eyes and listen to that horrific sound, I know, oh, that's the moment that I will do something. And I just want to say too, one thing that I know I really learned from this also was, I was always under the impression that in an incident, you don't want to flood 911. I feel like we grew up at a time when we were told not to overwhelm 911. Apparently, that's not the case anymore. We need to flood them. We need to call and say, I think he's using a pistol. I think he just walked past the cafeteria. I think he's headed out the back door. That flooding 911 shouldn't be something that we worry ourselves about or our kids about, but that we should give law enforcement as much detail about what they're wearing, what the weapon looks like, and exactly where they are, because that will help the officers on the ground. And that was a revelation to me, because I always thought, I won't call because everyone else is calling. Call. So anyway, I'll be waiting for when the magazine falls out. I'm there, and I've got my training by the door.
What else? Any other questions?
Classroom, sorry.
Go ahead, please.
I mean, all these are really reassuring, honestly, as
Yeah.
a parent. But in a classroom, I would expect the teacher to be the only one who has any training, if any. Because I am assuming not all the people who are trained are all the teachers as well. And then there is as you pointed out, have you been there mentally? There are people who have never been there mentally and can go there in a jiffy. And there are others who could have gone there 20,000 times and will freeze in the real event. And these are the variables that you just can't account for. And from a statistics point of view as well, just to point out, not to be, what is the statistic of actual engagement with an active shooter in those 900 deaths? What is the statistic? How many people really engaged with
I
an
actually
active
have
shooter?
that right here.
Thank you. That's why I asked. I'm curious.
All right, so this is for 2016 and 2017.
Sure.
And there's a lot more information, like I said. I put stuff I felt was pertinent for my presentation. Of those 50 incidents, 8 of the 50 were ended by citizens. Okay? 18 were ended by law enforcement. 11 of those 18, the suspect was killed by law enforcement. 13 of them, they committed suicide. And 14 of them, there was some exchange of gunfire. So we have 3 ways to end this. The person can give up, the person can take their own life, or law enforcement takes their life. Those are really the only 3 outcomes. And I tell you what, I have 2 children, one's 15 and one's 12. Any one of those outcomes is completely acceptable to me, as long as it stops. I don't care if the person commits suicide, I don't care if the person gives up. As long as it stops, that's acceptable to me. So, and if my presence of just showing up causes that person to take his own life or her own life, I'm completely fine with that.
Me too. But out of those 8 engagements, how many were effective and how many injuries occurred to the
I don't have that, but that will be online.
And that is the critical part, because then that gives us added impetus
Mhm.
to get more people trained to be not 8 out of 50, but 50 out of 50,
Sure,
right? But then if
you're
7 out of
there
50
already. You know, we have a response time. It takes us to get there.
Right, but if 7 out of 50 were actually themselves either fatally injured or in any way harmed, then gives us pause to think. Either to stop that strategy or to further improve the training to change that outcome.
Sure, absolutely. And I think with that point, this is something unique that at least Monroe County right now is doing with Sheriff Baxter's guidance, is this hands-on training. We're bringing out these rubber guns, as she was mentioning, and we're having people that are just deathly afraid of guns or anything to do with them, have an idea as to what this thing feels like, what it sounds like when an empty magazine hits the ground. And you hear about that, you learn about it, and then you walk away from guns. You never have to think about it again if that's not your cup of tea. And that's absolutely fine. But we're moving in that direction, as you're saying. I think that's a fantastic question, because we need everybody to have accountability and to have the ability to stop these things. It can't just be law enforcement. You know, it has to be everybody if we truly want it to stop. Because mental illness, we can't stop mental illness, and I call this a mental illness if somebody's out there doing that. You can't predict it. I mean, there's certain things that you can stop, but it's going to happen. So what can we do? And that's a wonderful point. Thank you.
Okay.
So Josh, did you get feedback from the teachers after this training, which sounds incredibly intense? You know, how bothered are they now by taking on this responsibility, if you will, and having gone through this? Is it, you know, marred them forever? Are they looking to be trained 3 times a year? What were their thoughts?
Well, there weren't a lot of teachers at that training. It was a lot of the district leadership. It was a lot of the teacher district-wide leadership. I believe one of the things that the committee is working on is what does that now look like for the building training. There were some of our teachers there that the response was, wow, you know, saying it as what Ann said, wow, this was intense, but this is something that we need to be aware of. And I know that Pat's office is planning on rolling something out for our teachers, kind of raise that more of that awareness piece. But it wasn't every teacher was there. This was a summer thing.
So how many were trained?
There's about 80 people.
80 total.
Right.
But not
Across the
teachers.
district.
So not
some
people in the room.
some
Not
definitely
people in
some
the building.
teachers.
Some.
There were some, but it was like the teacher leadership.
The idea
our
was
building
to
leadership.
train teachers.
They're trying to figure out how to roll that out
Right.
now.
At what level? And that's what Gina talked about was that some of the most distilled messages are what's going to be presented in this PowerPoint in the short term, while the district thinks about, does every teacher get this? Are they required to get this? Is this optional? How in-depth is it? We didn't want to do nothing in that middle time frame while those sort of careful decisions have to be made. And so that's where this PowerPoint, that some of the most kind of critical topics of like, how do you barricade the room? You know, how much time does it take to stay alive? Some of those things are going to be rolled out now while the district, I mean, it's not easy answers about, you know, does every teacher have to take it? You know, what level do they have to take it? Do they have to practice pulling the gun out of someone's hand? I mean, I will say there were some people had emotional reactions to that. People whose jobs and dedicate their lives to sitting in a classroom with kids, it was not easy for folks to go there. And so you know, it's a complicated decision, I think, for the district to think about exactly what you mandate versus what makes someone not want to teach anymore, quite frankly.
If Jean Strasabasco was here with her Honor an Educator mug, I think we'd all buy one right now, because this is yet another burden on our teachers, that they need to also
But
do
is
this.
it not a burden every day, even otherwise?
Yeah.
You know, I understand where you're coming from. In my profession, we do simulation all the time, and simulation is real. It can bring on the same bodily reactions as a real event does. Maybe not in the first 5 minutes, but as it goes on, people get into it. You know, but again, it's a question of it's a real threat. It's not. It's happening more and more frequently. We've just heard the statistics. You know, it's a totally different thing about arming. When people talk about arming, I would rather see prevention where you can defend rather than be offensive. Even any form of defensive training is much better than being offensive. And as you said, as a trained person, you cannot take somebody out when it's a moving target. And arming somebody who is not trained to that level is not going to be that helpful. But giving the tools to defend is really a worthwhile effort.
I can follow up on your question, from other districts that we've done multiple trainings where we have gone back and done the training for many of their teachers. Rush Henrietta is one of them. So every time that we do this instruction with Rush Henrietta, they send out a feedback form to all the teachers. And I was pleasantly very shocked at the positive response that we've gotten from everybody. I haven't received, and I've kept all this stuff. HFL, we've done the same thing. That's where I'm from. My kids go to school down there. Similar type of comments that, it was difficult. I start the presentation with a reenactment video of Columbine. Terrible thing to watch. Reenactment, I'm telling you, this is fake, but this is what it looks like. Every time I show that, I have people sobbing out there watching it. But I'm not gonna not show it because I'm making, because it's gonna make somebody cry to watch it. I want to strike up those emotions within you so you know if this happens, this is what it is. You're protecting my children, right? So you have to be able to work through that. So to answer that question, at least for Rush Henrietta and Hunterway Falls, they always provide those feedback forms individually from every person that sends it in. And across the board, most important training we've ever had. It was terrible to go through. It made me very uncomfortable. I can't wait for more.
Do you know if it's mandatory or optional?
I don't know, and if I did, I'd probably not speak. I'm not going to pit this.
What do you think it should be?
What do you
That's a good question.
recommend?
Yeah.
Those are great questions.
You had another question?
So to this point exactly, since a lot of these things that you present seem like they're not capital intensive, they seem pretty simple and common sense, right? Like you can do this almost in a week across the board. Why is it taking 2 decades, in your opinion, since Columbine, for us to be at this point?
My opinion?
Yeah.
Well, I think there's kind of a change in the way that we're looking at things. Not just law enforcement. And, I certainly can't speak for everybody, but because they're becoming more prevalent, every year we're getting more and more of these things. Even now, in part of my presentation, I'm putting up information on incidents where 14, 15, 16 people were killed, and nobody in the audience ever even heard of it because it was never publicized. It was never put out there. I think at some point, we're like, well, that's too hard to talk about, or that's too scary of a thing, and that's never going to happen here. And now we're coming to the realization, well, you know what, we better get prepared for something like this and hope that it never happens. But if this happens in a location and we haven't done anything about it, shame on us. So what's changed that? I don't know. I know that the changing factor for law enforcement's response was Columbine, 100%. A lot of people lost their lives at Columbine that didn't need to, because that's how we were trained. That's when we started training basic road patrol, SWAT tactics, giving them more equipment to be more effective and get in there and stop that threat. And every time one of these terrible incidents happen, we take whatever we can from it and learn. Las Vegas, who would have ever thought? How do you help yourself in a situation like that? But it goes way beyond that as well. It's the aftermath. It's that stuff that we have to think about, which we're not even talking about tonight. We need to recognize schools, businesses, they're all the same. What are we doing to support everybody after the fact? The real hard stuff to talk about, who comes and cleans the building? Is anyone ever coming in this building again? Are my teachers and my students coming back? What are we doing? What are we doing? Are we prepared not only to prevent it or to minimize it, but the aftermath? What do we do? Because that's the reality of it. Are your kids how are we going to help the children and the faculty and staff afterwards, mentally? Are we even going to have a school anymore? What are we going to do? So those are the hard things to talk about. Why it's changing, I don't know, but I'm damn glad it is that we can have these conversations.
I want to add just kind of an observation connected to what you said. I got my first degree in administration in 2005. I went back for more coursework and got another degree in 2016. At 11 years, I saw significantly more, in fact, the first time, talk about school safety plans, what to do in these situations, much more in the administrative programs. It's now part of training for school administrators, which is one of those things that, as I was sitting there talking to, young aspiring administrators in the class, it makes your stomach turn. But I'm glad this is part of the things that we're talking about now, because it is just something that we don't want to have as part of our expertise, but it's something we need to.
We have time for one more question. It's 2 minutes. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I have a question for Lieutenant Wicks. You mentioned that as soon as law enforcement gets on scene, it ends. I was wondering what you know about other districts doing as far as having an officer there always, present, someone assigned to the
Like
school.
an SRO?
Yeah, something like that, or maybe with a different title now, I don't know what their roles used to be, but something more along this role of being there for the school. Are they doing that in other districts?
There are, and that's a hot topic right now, big time, and it's district by district. I think you're probably aware of what just happened in Hilton, with they want to arm their security, right? And most of their security, I actually am friends with many of them, and a number of them were on the SWAT team with me that are working out there, right? There's pros and cons to both, and I think you brought it up, as far as if you do have somebody in that building that's their role, whether it's a police officer or security or what the case may be, that has to be followed with training, that person has that ability to stop that threat. So it doesn't, the point I was making with the long gun and the short gun is, somebody's ability to shoot at distance accurately of something that's moving, blah, blah. It's different when we're talking about actually having physical security there. Now, I can't take a stance on that one way or another in my position. But what I will tell you is this. It's certainly that is something for the district and the parents and that community to come together and make that decision, right? If there is a decision to arm, I think there's a lot of benefit to it, right? But there's also a lot of concern that comes with it that you can hopefully minimize with training. There's a cost involved. And that cost also is part of how are the kids feeling by having those people in there, right? Now, I'll say this on a personal level. Now, my daughter is a different story because she's my daughter and she knows what I do for a living. But if I didn't do this for a living and it made my daughter uncomfortable that there was a police officer in the school, I'm okay with that. Now, I'm not looking to have an armed guard at every door, and I don't want bars on the windows, and I don't want to turn it into a prison by any means. But if the difference of how my daughter, who's 12-year-old, is a little uncomfortable with it, as opposed to somebody that could potentially save her life, there's certain things I'm okay with, right? But there is a lot to it, and really, I back that up with the training is critically important. You can't just give somebody a gun and go in there and say, here you go protect my children. There's a lot more to it. So those are relationships that the districts have to have with the families, and the districts can have with local law enforcement, and see if, there are many districts that have SROs. They have law enforcement that are paid for by the district that are there, so the training comes from law enforcement, right? Are we the end-all, be-all? Absolutely not. But to have somebody in there skilled with a weapon, that's a decision that each district has to make. I kind of went around the question.
Can I make an observation on that? The observation regarding Parkland, there was an armed officer. Unfortunately, that did not help. It's just an observation, it's N of one, but that's an observation. And the other thought about the statistic, which led to this question, when officers arrive, the shooting stops. you started with the statistic that on average it takes 5 minutes. And maybe on average it takes 5 minutes for law enforcement to arrive. It could be coincidental rather than law enforcement stopped it, you know?
It could be.
Yeah, I'm just, again, I'm a numbers person. I'm looking at these statistics in a as objective way as possible.
Well, let me ask you a question without showing my hand. If somebody came in here right now with a gun, do you want me here or do you not want me here?
Of course.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
That is gut, right? That's reactionist.
Yeah.
But will I survive it? I don't know. I could be dead before you take him out. But that's a different thing.
But those are the questions that need to be asked, and that's certainly not my position to push anybody one way or another. But like in Parkland, I'm glad you brought that up, because what I believe to be true with that officer that didn't go in, part of the training that we had years ago was we wait until there's 3 officers on scene and then we go in together, because that's the best way we can survive it. That's totally changed. Monroe County, we have solo active shooter training. So now I can't mandate that a deputy goes in, right? But we've provided them the best training that they can receive, that they can go in and they have tactics to use as a one-person element. So that's something that we've had in this area a long time, to hopefully eliminate that, that 3 minutes or whatever it takes while one person's outside on camera behind a tree because they're waiting for somebody else to come in with them. So that could have been that person's training, and now that's our responsibility for law enforcement, to make sure we're providing them with the proper training to get in there and stop things. So we don't really know in any of these exactly why somebody did what they did, including law enforcement, because that's in his head. Maybe he had that training. He's like, no, I'm not going. I don't know. And I have every great intention in the world. I've been in my head 1,000 times of what I'm going to do. I'm very confident in what I'm going to do. I sure as heck hope I don't freeze, because I've never been in that position before. I just don't know. That kind of to your point from earlier. So we're doing the best that we feel is for our community and our districts, each one of them, with input from everybody. That's what we need.
I'm so grateful for you and thank you for coming tonight and talking to this audience. Thank you all for coming, because I think as a community, if we can work together on this, then we can help to prevent and protect. Thank you to Gina and Ann for your service on this committee and for bringing up these important issues, and to Josh and Mike here at Calkins Road. You guys are real rock stars, and we're very lucky to have you and the teachers here doing the work that they do for our kids every day. So thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you.
She does it on her phone.
We need that. We don't have to answer.